Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And I'm your co host, Tommy Duncan. It is Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Central. And if it is Wednesday night, it is Black
Black
Men
Men
Speak.
Speak. That's correct.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone.
So big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, spread the word, and hit that notification bell so you will be notified when new shows are uploaded, which is every Wednesday night at 8 p.m., like Tommy just said. With that being said, Tommy, you know, what's our topic for the night, and who is this interesting gentleman that's on our channel?
Absolutely. So we committed some time ago, Jimmy, with the request of some of our listeners to start focusing on some topics that are relevant to our young men out there.
Yes.
And so every first Wednesday of the month, without fail, until someone tells us to do otherwise, some of those parents who were talking to us before, we're going to focus on a topic that is relevant and germane, and we're going to talk about young black men, money, and financial freedom. And we are very, very fortunate to have a special guest tonight who has been dabbling in this arena for some decades now. We're going to give him an opportunity to kind of introduce himself and talk about what he does. And really the focus is having a conversation that I wish that more of us could have in our households. Wish, quite frankly, I could have seen or had a conversation like this when I was in my early 20s. God forbid my late teens,
Yes.
planting seeds that could germinate over the next couple of decades or so. And that's building that nest egg, accumulating
Yes.
wealth, and in that, I guess, search for the so-called holy grail of financial freedom at some point in time in your life. And so, without further ado, folks, I'd like to introduce one of my friends and colleagues, Mr. Earl Jefferson, who can kind of speak to some of this and can hopefully share some insight that might be of use to someone out there. And I'm going to let Earl say hello, introduce himself, talk a little bit about his background, and then we'll ask some questions and see where we go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you guys for having me, and thank you, Tommy, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Earl Jefferson. I'm the president of Seventh Harvest Investments. We're an investment management financial planning firm based out of Dallas, Texas, a firm which I started in a 2005, 2006 timeframe. And that being said, because of regulatory requirements, I just want to interject before we get deeper into our conversations that, of course, this talk today is not intended to be a solicitation or investment advice or recommendations in any kind of way. So please take it as general information. If anyone on the call would like specific financial advice, we always recommend that you contact a professional. All right. So that being said, and getting sort of the disclosures out of the way, give you a little bit more of my background. I actually started out in this business in 1991. So I have a sort of a special anniversary this year. Me and my love with the world of finances, capital markets, and financial planning, going on 30 years since I
Congratulations.
initially got licensed. Thank you, and has always been a deep passion of mine. It was always of interest to me, the choices that people make with the resources they have available and accessibility to. Studied economics in school, along with the human choice and the human social science of psychology. And I would be remiss to say that both disciplines I use on a daily basis in our practice here in the Dallas area.
Okay. So, Earl, I'm going to correct one thing you said. We want people to call you for their
Sure.
financial planning advice as opposed to just calling someone in general. So, and I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to get your business contact information and website. I will get that
For
from
sure.
Tommy and get it added to this the description in this video, so it'll be there tomorrow by the time the thing finish upload. So, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom. I'm pretty sure you want to jump into that first question.
there's so many things that I'd like to talk about, and we'll manage this the best way that we can, within the hour, a little bit less than we have. But what I'd like to start off with is to talk to us. I mean, because we live in a country that is purported to have been built on the foundation of capitalism and wealth, individual effort in order to create and build wealth. And, a lot of that has been, what is the appropriate word to say it? When our ancestors got here, we didn't particularly have access to the resources to build wealth until a couple of hundred years, maybe into the country and its foundation being built. And if we look at maybe the last few generations or so, a lot of us grew up with parents and or grandparents who started having a modicum of discretionary income. There were some folks proud of that who were fortunate if we look at the late 1800s and early 1900s to have access to that. But in mass, we are just, as a community of folks, and I mean Black community, in building what we consider to be nest eggs so that we can pass that on to our children's and or children's children. So what I'll start off with in setting that context is, what is it in general that you have seen over the last 30 or some odd years in the industry in terms of families building wealth, access to opportunities in order to build financial freedom? What are some of the things, since you've started off with in this industry, that has changed, opened up, that you've seen that you found interesting?
In terms of improvements within
Yes.
the industry, of course, yeah, definitely. Well, we live now in the age of information, of course, right? And so the internet has made information more readily available, and not just information, but the ease at which someone can take action based on the information that they have access to has changed dramatically. And so much so that it has commoditized a lot of competitive industries and professionals, for that matter, such that it has driven down the cost of doing business. It has made it more convenient to implement strategies, to automate financial planning strategies, and so forth. And so, I've seen some incredible innovations, not just for the consumer, but also for business owners and for practice owners like myself, to just be more efficient, and be more effective in our reach and how we serve, our clients. And so I think innovation has probably been the most significant change, and in our view, just really within the last 10 years. We have seen things happen within the last 10 years that I never thought would be possible in terms of how you transact the buying and selling of investments, in terms of how we communicate with each other, and so forth. So yeah, so I do think that's probably the most profound change that I've seen. I do think also too that um, social media and other media sources, has proven to be an effective medium for communication. Given that it's the correct, sort of messaging, but it's just as effective with messaging that may not necessarily adhere to sound financial practices. And so, yeah, so I think that's probably the most significant thing, Tommy, that I've seen just within the last few years.
Now,
And
for
if
if
Go
I
ahead,
may,
Jimmy.
if I may, for young people coming up, let's say for parents who want to start teaching their children about, sound financial practices, saving, even investing, possibly even entrepreneurship. Um, One, at what age do you think that would be a good time to start. And then the second question is for parents who don't have that information, that knowledge themselves, how do they learn from someone like you? So they
Yeah,
can at least, even if they don't have money to invest, at least the knowledge they can
right,
pass on to their children. And
right.
then, are there any instruments that you have that are geared towards maybe someone who's economically stressed, that don't have a great deal of discretionary money, but still,
Hmm.
should, I mean, everyone should try to find a way to invest a small portion, no matter what you have, into
Right.
something to possibly potentially grow wealth. And you never know. You may buy a few shares of that Google stock before it blew up, and at least be 100,000 there now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's never too early, to start influencing and exposing your children to matters that are related to finances. But I think one of the best ways to start, and I have seen this in case study after case study, situation after situation, is to show your kids as early as you possibly can, as early as they can perceive it, just really strong work ethic, right? And that may be just in how you upkeep your home. It may be how timely you are when you arrive to work, how hard you work, even beyond your normal scheduled hours and so forth. But I think if there's a way we could embed you know better, stronger work ethics in our kids at really, really early ages, I think that's huge.
Okay.
When it comes to investing, I tell my clients this, the first place we should always start is ourselves, right? We should always invest in ourselves first. And what I mean by that is there is a one-to-one correlation with your knowledge base and your income potential, right? And the moment you become an expert at what you do, right? You typically will find it more of an issue of managing the inflow of opportunities
Hmm.
than it is to identifying and locating opportunities. I consider that the surplus effect, right? The better you are at what you do, the higher demand you're going to be.
True.
And that's something as simple as customer service. How do you deal with customers and sometimes even difficult personalities? How well do you deal with people? I think is huge in any profession. And
Okay.
so I would start with the investment of self first. I think I would build on that. As your knowledge base and your expertise develops, by which then your income potential has improved, right? As your income potential improves, your discipline should improve as well. And I think that's also a great lesson to teach our kids as well, as early as possible. The better discipline you are with the resources that you're blessed with, the greater opportunities you will have in the realm of investing, right? And in my world and in my professional experience, investing isn't just, of course, buying a stock, right? Or just for 401k contributions. There's so many different medium for investing. I think some of those areas, such as saving for retirement and stocks and so forth, I think those are helpful and very important. But if you are doing a great job of living on less than what you make, right, you will further extend sort of this surplus, paradigm, in that when opportunities come your way, you'll be prepared and ready to take advantage of them.
So if I heard you correctly, at the root of that is don't just go to work to become the best at what you do. and,
Absolutely,
and then
absolutely.
opportunities will come your way when you achieve expert status or SME status in what you're doing.
For sure,
Okay,
absolutely, and
good,
it's
very good
not an
advice.
overnight process.
No,
I don't mean to imply that. Hey, look, in 18 months, right? You'll be a rarity in your expertise. No, I mean
some
it
say ten
is
thousand hours to become really good at what you
absolutely,
do.
absolutely. It takes time.
No, that brings up a very good question. And so, detouring to that, becoming very good at what you do, or the best at what you do, opening up doors, opening up opportunities so you can um, secure additional income, what you would say that is a precursor to surplus in terms of resources.
Hmm.
And you have folks out there who are doctors, who are attorneys, high net worth individuals. I
For
mean,
sure.
folks, entertainers,
Hmm.
folks who play
Hmm.
basketball, but
Hmm.
football, all those other folks.
Right.
Sometimes they may become the best of the best, and they may have a high income, but that doesn't always lead to financial
Hmm.
freedom and or wealth.
That's a great point. Absolutely. And yeah, and I can expand on that, and I think inner stage, discipline, right, and quite honestly, I think it's helpful to seek out advice, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I studied economics in school, and there was this principle of comparative advantage, right? You may be very good at your medical practice, right? And because you focus so much to be great at that, you may be insufficient or not as good in another area, right? You may not be the best cook, right? You may not be, the best, financial advisor or financial decision maker. That law of comparative advantage says, hey, seek out, other experts, right? And be a student of that, right? What I hear often and I run into, as you guys would imagine, from time to time, people, looking for returns, right? People looking for the next, hot investment idea or the investment that did, 50% last year. How do I get some of that this year? Well, that's really not the best approach. Right, it's much better, and it is historically proven to be a lot more effective if you really dig into who you are, right? What are you wanting to accomplish, right? And in what time frame, right? And then try to figure out, maybe even with the help of a professional, what's the smartest, most efficient way to achieve what I want to achieve, right? And um, and, 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 and sort of back into the goals that you might have, as opposed to chasing the hot opportunity that may now be stale, right? May have been wonderful last year.
Right.
You get into it this year and you lose your shirt.
You bring up a very good point, and I'm going to try to simple this. Will take this down a notch in terms of someone who may not have a background in finance, or are barely even saving any money, just
Right,
everyday working Joe Blow. Because I'm hearing a couple of things. What Jimmy mentioned in terms of finding the next best big thing, whether that's stock,
hmm,
real estate, or whatever it happens to be. And I'm comparing decision versus discipline. And when I say
mm,
decision in terms of
right,
what it is, trying to figure out what it is you need to be investing in terms of the discipline of investing, or the discipline of that process that's going to help you achieve your financial goals.
for
And
sure,
I'm not saying that they are mutually exclusive. Obviously, there
sure.
has to
They
be a
go
little bit
hand
of
in
both.
hand.
If you have discipline, but you're choosing a lot of bombs, then that's not
Right,
going to work. But the
right.
question is there a correlation between the discipline and the decision as to what you're doing with your money, and the discipline and the process? And
Right.
I apologize if that's a little bit confusing.
No, 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 no. You're going right where I'd love for you to go, because I didn't want to get off this call without making one point, and that is, in my experience, one of the top reasons why investment um, experiences fail, right? When clients or investors don't achieve their goals, it's typically tied to disruption, right? And what I mean by that is, time and investing goes hand in hand, right?
Hmm.
One of the best ways for you to hedge your risk is to apply time, right? And when we come across someone, or if I hear someone talking about their investment experience and how awful it is, I typically ask one question, right? How much time did you commit to it, right? And even if you committed time, how many times did you change course, right? Presidential election, you got out of the market, right? New tax bill passed, you get back into the market, right? Winter storm, you get out of the market, right? Every time there's a new headline, when investors are constantly disrupting the strategy that they set forth to be in place at the very beginning, based on who they are, based on what they're trying to accomplish, that disruption typically gets in the way of the desired rate of return and the targeted expected level of risk. All right, it typically heightens the level of risk. Now, now that I've gotten the disruption point out of the way, I want to say a little bit about the how, right? because um, because that gets into this idea of the Holy Grail. I think we talked about that before, and advisors and sometimes even investors' abilities to be clairvoyant. Right? We've got a crystal ball. It's sitting on my desk. We know exactly where the market is going. We know exactly where a stock's price is. That just does not exist. Right? That does not exist. And since you're not able to predict the future, right? And if you are, we've got an opening. But if you're not able to predict the future, right? What it tells you is that you should probably hedge your bets. Right. It tells you that you should probably diversify amongst multiple types of investments that behave differently under different conditions over different periods of time. Right. And so in that time frame, that collective choice of investments that you've made may yield you or deliver different results over different periods of time, right? but
Hmm.
but your initial time frame is still 10 years, right? Hypothetically speaking, you started out with this strategy saying, hey, look, I need to be here in 10 years or here in 20 years. That's still the same, but your individual investments that make up your portfolio, if you will, may do different things at different times. And your ultimate goal is to achieve, an expected rate of return at a targeted risk level. Whenever you're deviating from those risk levels, right, or it seems like you've deviated significantly away from your return expectations over a considerable amount of time, maybe you ought to make adjustments to those individual investments that are in your portfolio, right?
Okay.
Maybe it's time to add something else. Maybe it's time to collect profits or to eliminate something that has not performed as well.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Brother Jefferson, you're basically saying get a plan. So define out what you want, 10 years, 20 years, what your goals are, and define those. And I think what most young people may find is that this, may say their response is going to be, I'm barely making it. And so
Mhm.
either, and you talked about, living at your means. If you're living at
Right.
your means, I don't care what your means are, whether it's 30,000 a year or 30 million a year. If you're using every
For sure.
penny of it to live, you're not getting ahead, and at some point,
Mm,
you're not growing for the future. So either you
right.
find a way to increase your income, and you talked about becoming an expert in what you do, or you go out and get another job or supplement what you're currently making, or
Right.
or and you could do both. Cut back on your living expenses. don't live up to your means, live below your means. And I think you talked about that
Right.
also as a strategy. So can you kind of revisit that a little bit for young people to make sure they fully understand that you have to sacrifice somewhere. You either got to
For
bring in
sure.
more income and divert that
Yeah.
towards your long-term plans,
Right.
or you have to cut back on what you currently have if you don't want to go out and work a second job or a part-time job. But uh,
Right.
but if you're taking that extra wealth that you're saving or and earning and putting it towards something that's growing rather than appreciating the asset, then now you are truly, even if you are, a lower socioeconomic, you are growing in life
Right.
rather than
Right.
appreciating the asset, then now you.
Okay.
That was my fault.
No, okay, I was wondering.
No.
That sound like.
I was trying to tie in,
No worries.
and I appreciate you bringing that up, Jimmy, because the question then becomes for the second half of this show. We're about 25 minutes after an hour.
Sure.
Let's talk to our young people out there. Of course, this show is targeted towards young men, but I'll just say young people. Let's have a straightforward, simple, candid conversation with our young people out there and
Yes.
with their parents, and let's assume they don't have a financial background. They don't understand the principles that we're talking about. But let's just have a straight chaser conversation. Man, whether you have an 8-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 28-year-old
Hmm.
that you are trying to get on the straight and narrow path, what is it that we're talking to our young people about? What are we saying to our young brothers out there, our young sisters about that's going to hopefully plant a seed that's going to produce good fruit? What do we need to be talking to them about right
Right.
now at their level?
For sure. For sure. I would sum it up simply by just saying, don't believe the hype. Right. This is not an overnight process. Right. This is not a get rich quick, an instant success type If you're able to accomplish that, and I don't know, I really don't know anyone shy of a lottery winner, and we don't have any lottery winner clients. But even with lottery winners, how many cards did you have to play before you
Right.
actually won? We have some professional athletes as clients. We've have some extremely successful business owners as clients, and none of them, none of them got there overnight. It was a pathway to get there. And so what I would say to the young audience is, I know there's a lot of messaging that's out there, uh, and it's appealing. It's extremely tempting, but if you really want sustainable, um, you know, uh, you know, accumulation of items of value and wealth that is that has longevity tied to it, be willing to put in the work,
Right.
and not just be willing to put in the work, be willing to put in the time, right? I just mentioned to you guys, when I first got into this business, I was in my early 20s, right? 1991. And man, I'll tell you, 30 years later, I've got incredible stories to tell you that was involved with this pathway to get to where we are, today. And I don't want to discourage anyone, right, who may have patience, challenges with patience. But I will tell you, if you look at if you look at the statistics of the wealthy in America, if they didn't inherit it, right? Or overnight come up with an incredible invention. It was blocking and tackling,
What does that
right?
look like? The
Right. So
blocking and tackling.
yeah, and so the blocking and tackling, number one, it involves time, right? And when I say time, I'm going to tell you years, right? However, the earlier you get started, the better, right?
Right.
The blocking and tackling is also, we talked about self-investment first, but it's also involving the discipline of saying no, right? Being able to say no to things so that you can build for a better tomorrow, right? Does it mean that you can't have some of the enjoyments of life today, but moderate that, right? I also think the blocking and tackling means automate as much as you can. Right. One of the best ways to ensure that you stay within your means is to set aside what you intend to pay for bills, right? Set aside what you intend to pay yourself and automate it as quickly as you possibly can, and monitor that every quarter, right? Monitor that every year. See where you are 5 years later after you've been funding your retirement account, after you've been building your savings, after you've been working towards your cash reserves. I don't think that I think it's very difficult if you run to the ATM machine every payday and you pull all of your money out, right? And you pay your bills and you leave the remaining portion of cash in your pocket. I think
Pocket.
it's very difficult to survive a weekend and not usurp a lot of those dollars in your
You know that
pocket,
cash is
right?
going to burn through your pocket.
It burns, and I believe me, I've lived it, right? I've been there, right?
Not you,
As a
not
young
you. Don't
adult,
say it.
yeah. As a young adult, it's like until you decide to implement discipline, right? And there are so many tools today that can help you with that discipline. Until you decide to commit, it's going to be extremely difficult, right? There's a lot of fun to be had out here for many young adults.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you that fun to be had is in direct conflict many times with your long-term financial goals.
What do you feel? How do you feel about saving bonds for young people, like kids, high school,
Mm,
to where they
yeah.
could go buy a $25 bond or a $50 bond, double E bond, and So
Right.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm going to shy away from any sort of specific investment
Okay.
opinions in this call, guys. But what I will say is this, right? There is a relationship that has existed throughout time between risk and reward, right? And time, right? So risk, reward, time. All right, and I'm going to tell you guys something. The more time you have, right, as I said earlier, to commit to an investment
Hmm.
a strategy, the more risk you can expose yourself to. All right, because time is one of the best hedges for risk. Right, it helps to mitigate. If you have a loss this year, but you've got 10 more years to invest, it's highly likely that you'll make up for those losses, right, in time. Well, if you're if you're adding more risk, right, your expected rates of return should be higher as well. All right. Now, just I would say bonds in general, right, tend to be right on the lowest end of the risk spectrum.
Right.
Right, it's one of the most conservative. It's right along in the neighborhood of cash. Right, and by the way, cash is an investment, right?
Hmm.
You can depending on how this inflation picture continues on, you can actually lose purchasing power
Oh yes,
holding cash,
yes.
right?
You
Inflation
will.
will
Um,
eat away
You
your
and, and
will.
earnings
and vice
regardless.
versa, right? So
Hmm.
in some markets, right, and we know firsthand with my firm, some markets, cash is your best performing asset class, right? And so the more conservative you are with your investments, the lower rates of returns should you expect, right? Now, here's the deal. If you have more time, right,
Hmm.
to absorb more risk, why wouldn't you try to optimize your returns? Right. That's really the mathematical equation, right? The shorter the amount of time you have, right, the higher the probability that you may lose money in the markets or more aggressive investments, right? And so you should be curbing some of your risk, right? You should be reducing the risk.
Well, risk is something that overall we don't teach our young people to deal with. We tend to shy away from pain and move towards pleasure. And I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes risk can be scary. But it is a part of like you said, it's part of the investment process. You have to
For
learn to
sure.
manage it. Now, even though you can't give out, investment advice here, Me personally, I'm a bad news
Mhm.
investor. I love to hear
Mhm.
companies not meeting their financial goals or meeting what the
Right.
street deem they should, or their earnings reports are poor, and that cause a ripple effect. Because when bad news is out there, there are bargains to be had. So I think that's the
Mhm.
best time to be buying, personally. But what would you say overall? I mean, like I said, young people have some struggles. We know that we should. I mean, 401k is one way of doing it, and that's generally managed through our employers a lot of times. But outside of that, like you said,
Mhm.
sit down and talk with a planner, someone like you, preferably you, and set your 10-year, 20, 30-year goals and start working towards that. You don't necessarily have to dump tens of thousands every year into it, but you may be able to dump a few thousand into it safely without radically impacting your lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. I think that the long-term goal is extremely important, but there are multiple smaller goals that are very helpful in our practice. They are required, right, along the way, right, and there's reasons for them. I'll just kind of paint a picture for you guys. Just imagine building a house, right? And you want to start at the foundation and get your way all the way up to the roof, right? Well, um, planning and preparing yourself for investing is very similar, right? The foundation of your plan really starts with the blocking and tackling that we talked about earlier, right? Is how do I get to a place where I can live on less than what I make,
Right.
right? That's the first thing. And once you get to that place, it's going to be extremely important that you build yourself a cushion, right? A reserve set aside for emergencies, right? In the event that you lose a job or in the event that your tires go out, you want that kind of cushion right there. And the goal for that is to help avoid disruption of the other components or the other portions of your house, right? Once you have your emergency reserves built up, then you want to make sure that, hey, you know what, if I got outstanding liabilities out there, I've got high interest debt out there, I want to eliminate those, right? Because those are disruptors as well. I want to
True.
try to get those things out of the way so that when I'm getting real serious about my 401k, right, which is another leg down the road, I want to be able to commit to this thing, right? I want to be able to commit to it in good markets. I want to commit to it in bad markets, and ideally in bad markets, as you said, during the bad news times, right? But I want to
Yes.
commit to it. I want to commit to it, and once you get those things out of the way, then I'd say, and for young people as well, but these are for the parents primarily. Look at your risk protection, right? What type of risk protection do you have in place along the lines of what if I get sick, right? Along the lines of what if I lose a loved one, right? Or if something happens to me, I should happen to pass away. Along the lines of what if I get into a car accident,
Right.
right? What if something inadvertently happens to me in my apartment, right? And the things that are of value to me inside the apartment, something happens to that, flood or fire or something. Think about that risk component, right? And your risk protection is extremely important because if something unforeseen happens, right, that sets you back, significantly, you want to be hedged for that,
True.
right? You want to be protected so you don't have to pull everything out of your cash reserves or your emergency fund, right? And then when you have that risk protection in place, then I think it's really important for you to start thinking about, you're starting to get into the attic of your house, right? You're putting the sheetrock on your ceiling, right?
Hmm.
The walls are all coming in and you're getting into the upper parts. You want to make sure you're taking your full advantage of any potential tax shelters you have, right? Or tax qualified plans or company benefits by way of a retirement plan, especially if a portion of your compensation is tied to a match that they're providing. One of the beautiful things, right? We said we're going to talk a little bit about wealth on this call. One of the beautiful things about tax qualified plans, especially those that are available by way of your employer, is that your contributions. Your contributions can help to reduce your current year tax liability.
Right.
Right, right, and what I mean by that is if you make $40,000 a year and you're able to sock away $5,000 or $10,000 into your company plan, Uncle Sam's only gonna tax you on $35,000,
Hmm.
right? Now that's in our eyes, that's a return on your money in the current year before you invest in any stocks. All right. And once you have that machine on autopilot, everyone I've ever recommended this to, they really committed to it. They always come back and they say things like, "Man, you're a genius," and things like, "Hey, look, this is blocking and tackling." Right.
So Earl, let me make sure I hear this, and let me make sure everybody else heard that, because
Sure.
it may be connecting, it may not. So what you're saying is, if you're working for a company,
Hmm.
and we're talking about a correlation between your income and what you can invest in and what Uncle Sam is going to take away from you.
That's right.
That if you put your money into certain vehicles, then Uncle Sam isn't taxing you on 40,000, he's taxing you on 35,000. So
That's right.
just to make sure we keep this simple, are we talking about like a 401k? Or what are we talking about when you
Yeah,
say
we're
tax
talking
qualified?
about, tax qualified plans like a 401k
Okay,
or
gotcha.
403b if you're a
Okay.
teacher. Mm.
So that means that if you put in, there are a lot of folks right now who are going into their open enrollment process. Ours just finished.
Okay.
So if you're saying that, okay, well, I'm going to put a certain percent of my income, depending on what your company matches or whatever it is, if you put that money in that vehicle, that 401k, that 403b, then when Uncle Sam comes around, he's not taxing you on your total. He's taxing you after you put that money into
That's
that
right. That
Right.
is
plan.
correct. That's exactly right. And the limits, your contribution limits on your 401k and 403bs, I mean, they're upwards of 19, $20,000,
Mm.
right? So if you have the ability to eliminate a $20,000 income that would be taxable, right? It's huge. It's huge, right? There really aren't very many vehicles on the planet that can compound wealth that way over time, right? And so it's a vehicle that we believe every investor, right? And this is even, our high net worth investors. They have access to vehicles such as this, or high income investors.
Hmm.
You have to take advantage of it. Now, let me wrap up the house, right? I'm not going to,
Yeah.
go into a lot more details, but once you have those steps in place, right? You've got your foundation, you've got the brick, the windows are in, you've got drywall in, the ceilings in, and so forth, and now you got to put the roof on the house, right? And you call me up and you say, "Hey, look, I've done all those things, or I've got the cash reserve. I'm maxing out my contributions to my retirement plan. I'm getting the match. I'm reducing. I'm essentially keeping more of what I make, right? What next? Right? What next? The what next is now you start to build an investment portfolio,
Okay.
right? That may be more aggressive or more specific to a goal than some of those other components of the house,
I
right?
see.
Well, why is that the roof and why is that not the foundation, right? Well, it's the roof because it's a lot less likely that you will disrupt that investment strategy. You may not even call me, right, if you have all of the other foundational things in place, right?
Got you.
We have found that when we implement that approach with our clients, the results are significantly better than if we were to just throw them into an investment portfolio the day they walk in our
Got
office.
it. So now I
Let me
understand the point you were making about the short-term goals and not necessarily just jumping to the long-term goals right away. So you build that foundation first, and then you work your way up to those more.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
let me speak very specifically to our youth through our parents, because you said something that was very profound,
Hmm.
that folks have access to today. And if, depending on the company, you can make some of these changes in some of these tax qualified programs. Is it one time of the year, any time of the year?
It depends on the company.
Now, this is the next question. We're talking about something called deferred gratification, because what you're
Hmm.
doing is you're trading money that you would be getting now in your pocket,
Right.
even though it is taxed, for investing potential for later. And when we're talking to our youth, the one advantage that they have over all of us on this show right now is time.
Right.
If
Hmm.
they're young and they're working.
Right.
So when they get our age, when they begin to accumulate the compound impact of making those tax deferred investment over a couple of decades. And when you look at what that can do in 2 or 3 or 4 decades,
Hmm.
that is what we're talking about. So if we're talking to our young people, if we're talking to parents who are raising young people or who are influencing young people, how do you recommend that we teach and reinforce deferred or delayed gratification? Because that's the big issue that I
Yeah.
think that we're dealing with in a lot of cases.
For sure. For
And you
sure.
have children, and
I
I'm pretty
do.
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you got some of these same things that you'd have to deal with. But parenting is
Absolutely.
parenting. How do we do that?
Yeah.
What are your recommendations?
First, I think it's definitely important to make choices, a priority, in your household, whether it's financial or anything else, ultimately, there is an outcome or a consequence to every choice we make, right? So that's super important. I think we should be having conversations at home regarding financial choices, right? And it doesn't require a degree in finance, right? So if it was just, it's super important that you save, right? I think that's a lot, right? Beyond that, and a lot of these young people, many of the young people I talk to and that work for me, they're sharp, right? Many of them are sharp. They get how to include technology in some of these choices, right? And what I mean by that is, putting more things on autopilot. Right. This is the subscription generation, right? Everything is a subscription and so forth. Well, subscribe to yourself, right? Before you grab Hulu or Netflix or anything else, start your own subscription, right? And you can put your name on it, and then make sure that the important things are going to happen no matter what, right? Put savings on autopilot. It may not even be, a retirement plan at work, right?
Right.
It may just be the savings account. Make sure that a portion of your check is going to go there automatically,
So
just like you would for any bill.
if I'm hearing you correct, because I want to make sure I heard it correct, when
Hmm.
you talk about these subscriptions, I'm very clear what you're talking about. Is it that concept of pay yourself first before
Absolutely.
anybody? Because at the
Absolutely.
end of the day, the bills would always be there.
That's
The
right.
tax man will always be there. The government will. So
Right.
why would you not pay yourself first? And at the end of the day, if you have a discipline of paying yourself first, you will always end up with something in your pocket or in the bank at the end.
Absolutely.
So I want to
Absolutely.
address something you said. You mentioned Hulu and some other subscription services, which brought to mind how you spend your time.
Hmm.
Probably just as important as how you spend your money. If you are spending your discretionary time doing things that are productive, increasing your knowledge, improving your skills, getting closer to being that expert or that SME, those are things that will hopefully pay dividends in the long run versus sitting down in front of that TV for 4 and 5, 6 hours a day, dead time. Very
Hmm.
unproductive, maybe entertaining, but there's no long term reward off of that investment in time. So, can you talk about the how time as a commodity in our lives and how you spend it is just as important how you spend your money?
Without a doubt. I mean, it's you know, we talk a lot about the technical aspects of portfolio management in our office, and I'm going to tell you, they all start from three very significant variables. Time is one of them,
Hmm.
risk, comfort, and risk level, right? And then expected returns, right? Time is it's critical from the standpoint of it's the one thing that we only get a finite amount of,
Right.
right? And it's possible that you could not optimize the finite amount of time that you have in your lifetime, right? And one of the things I would probably encourage families to do, right, is just pull up the examples, right, of great individuals or people who made and maximized their use of time, right? And there are also adverse examples as well, right? I actually, I'm not a gamer, but I'm a fan of gaming, right? But even with gaming, right? So my son is a gamer, right? You've got to put limits on the things that are not priority,
Right.
right? You got to put limits on the things that are not going to have the largest impact on your life.
That's correct.
If you have the discipline to do that, the consequence of the good choices you make ultimately will pay their own reward.
That's correct.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left, guys. So let's kind of focus on where we can close this out. This time has gone very
Right.
fast. You've given us a lot of good insight and information. We've thrown some questions out there. We want to make sure that, we are talking to, our young people out there who are just starting out, who have this time, who have this energy. Probably like us, they thought they had, a million years,
Hmm.
when they were
Mm,
teenagers.
mhm.
Adulthood couldn't get out there fast enough. And then when they got there and they started figuring out what real life was like, they were wishing they could go back home, kind of like I wish I could, until I figured out I couldn't go back.
Right.
And you just had to figure things out. But a couple of things I'd like to put out there that you said that I think are very important. One is making a commitment to do something, take action. It doesn't matter what situation you're in, whether it's in a good situation or a bad situation. It's making a commitment to do something. Even if you're in a financial hole, making a
Hmm.
commitment to get out of that hole, or if you're kind of at, I have no savings, I have absolutely no retirement investment, is doing something to change that. So you have commitment to take action. Then you have a process. I mean, everyone has a different measurement of what success looks like, but coming up with a process to help get you from point A to point B and developing a process, it may not be perfect, but it's probably better than doing nothing.
Absolutely.
And so you have commitment, you have to do something, you have a process to do something, and then you have the discipline, which is what you've been talking about, is the consistency and the discipline. It may not be finding the next Facebook or finding the next Google, but developing a process and being disciplined about sticking with that process,
Hmm.
and then looking at, evaluating, scorecarding, or doing whatever you need to do to figure out, is what I'm doing working? How do I need to make adjustments?
Right.
How do I know whether I'm successful or not? And then you layer that time horizon thing that you were talking about on that. And again, to young people who are out there, young brothers who are out there today, young sisters who are out there, let me tell you, the greatest asset that you have, and I wish I could get more of it, is
Hmm.
that time.
Hmm.
Yes.
Because I think what Mr. Jefferson is saying is very important. When you're young, you have time to make a few mistakes and still recover.
Right.
Boy, I
That's
give
right.
everything I have to stand in line of that time machine and go back. I mean, really. My advice to young people would be simple: fall in love early, get married early. Hopefully, create a situation where you have two incomes. Find a way to live off one income and aggressively save and invest that second income. 3, 5 years, if you I mean, just be disciplined about it. You'll now have money for that down payment on your new house or a nice house, or you'll be able to set yourself up to live comfortably, in the long term. And by all means, make sure you go and talk to Brother Jefferson here and get some advice on what to do with that second income. Take that second check and just give it to him. Signing it back, make it a subscription service where you don't even think about it. And in 3 or 5 years, I promise you, he'll make sure that you're in really good shape at that point. I'm
I
putting him on the
promise.
spot.
We got to watch keywords like promise, right?
Okay, well, there's a
Any,
probability. There's a
gotcha.
probability you're going to be in really good shape in a few years
Yeah.
of aggressively
Let-
taking that second income and doing something positive with it.
All right.
Any for those who are willing to read any lay books or
Mhm.
books in layman terms that you might recommend, especially for folks who just don't have the background. They, in their household, they never talked about money and finances. They just don't have the foundation there,
Mhm.
but they're willing to maybe go to the library or go to audio books or something of that nature. Any
Sure.
thoughts or recommendations?
Yeah, yeah. Without necessarily making an endorsement, I think a great book for everyone to read, young and old, would be The Millionaire Next Door.
Yes.
It's a very it's a timeless book. It's been around for a very long time, but it gives a lot of great examples of how the blocking and tackling over time works really really well. I think that. Sometimes, and my kids, other young people in my life, I think sometimes it can be difficult, because so much is happening so fast immediately to them. It can be difficult to see the benefit of patience and what the next 10 years might look like. Now the one thing I can definitively say, you continue to live, it will happen, right? And the choices you make today, can have the most and will have the most
That
profound
is true.
effect of what
That
your
is
10
correct.
years look like.
Hmm.
And I read Millionaire Next Door. Man, it's probably been at least 15 or 20
I
years
was going to
ago.
say 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's
Oh
probably
yeah,
close, right.
yeah,
It is a fantastic book. I would probably add to that Rich Dad, Poor Dad
for sure.
by Robert Kiyosaki. It's definitely one of those that makes you think differently after
Hmm.
you've read it than before. And so it's also a great book for folks who are investors. It doesn't teach you per se how to invest, but it kind of changes your mindset,
Well,
your
it changed
mindset,
mine,
and creates
Tom,
a
for
shift.
sure.
It creates a shift in your mindset. So, as we close out this show, we have about 5 minutes left. Um, one, we appreciate you being here. Hopefully, it won't be the last time we have a chance to talk to you, but I think you've provided some great insight, some great mind share in terms of
Okay.
things that our young people can do, and our young brothers in particular, because our focus now is, providing information and exposure for our young men out there who need to be leaders,
Correct.
fathers, caretakers, of their households, good husbandmen, so to speak.
Right.
And so they need to have that foundation. And that's why we want to have people like you on our show to share some things that you have learned throughout your life experience in terms of your personal life and your career that might be able to help them out in some way, large or small, that could make a difference. And if it just helps one person, it's worth it.
Okay.
I think that's wonderful, and it's been my pleasure, guys. I really
Thank you so
appreciate you having
much.
me on.
Yes, thank you. Now, please come back. And Tom, we're almost at the end of the hour, top of the hour. So, and of course, people here on Black Men Speak know how we close things out with a prayer.
Yeah.
So we're gonna ask brother Tommy here, TD, to go ahead and close us out with a prayer.
All right, good deal. If everybody could bow their heads, dear Lord and gracious Father, we come before you this evening, thanking you, bringing us together again, Father, so that we can hopefully share some thoughts and insight that may be of benefit to someone out there who is listening now, who is listening in the future. Father, we thank you for shaping us. We thank you for molding us. We thank you for ordering our steps, Father, even in spite of our own humanly thoughts and our human emotions, that something that, we have said or done or shared will make a difference in someone's life, because that is the reason why we're here. Father, we ask that you would serve your purpose through us. We thank you for bringing Brother Jefferson here today. We ask you would
Yes.
bless his family, that you would bless him personally, that you would bless the clients that he is working with, Father, that he may continue to do your work here on earth as you would will it in heaven, Father. And until we meet again, Father, we ask that you would just protect us throughout this next week. And in your precious name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
All
Yes, sir.
right.